Thanks for watching our love stories. Subscribe to the channel, leave your like, and activate the bell for new videos. Imagine waking up one morning to find the world quiet. Not the regular, sleepy Sunday kind of quiet, but the kind of silence that presses against your eardrums, that whispers a truth too big to comprehend. You're alone. Not metaphorically, not emotionally, literally. It began like any other headline that's too ridiculous to believe. Experimental gas leak at global research facility. Officials assure public there's no cause for alarm. Well, that aged like unrefrigerated shrimp. The lab in question, a high security, international research complex hidden somewhere in the Arctic Circle. No one knew what they were working on. Rumors said climate control. Some said a cure for aging. The more dramatic conspiracy theorists believed it was some kind of chemical time-freezing device. As it turns out, maybe the conspiracy theorists were onto something. Because in a single night, without warning, something unimaginable happened. A strange, greenish gas seeped through the cracks of the lab, slithered into the air currents, and in less than 12 hours, the entire planet went still. People froze. Not dropped dead. Not fainted. Froze. Mid-laugh. Mid-sneeze. Mid-sip of overpriced coffee. Their bodies became stone-like. Solid as granite. Eyes wide open. Some terrify. Others, smiling like sculptors, capturing a snapshot of life, permanently paused. And in this new, statuesque planet, only two people kept breathing. Our story doesn't start with a bang or with heroes in lab coats scrambling to save the day. No, it starts in a tiny apartment on the 9th floor of a building with bad plumbing and worse neighbors. The kind of place where hope goes to retire. Meet Alex, 32, male, single, by choice and also because dating apps drained his will to live. He works in it, which mostly means he restarts computers for people who think password is still a strong password. Cynical? Check. Overly sarcastic? Double check. Emotionally available? Absolutely not. He didn't notice anything wrong at first. The power had gone out during the night, but that wasn't new. The Wi-Fi was down. The fridge smelled like betrayal, and there was an alert on his phone, something about atmospheric containment. He rolled his eyes, muttered something about government fear-mongering, and made his way downstairs to the local cafe, which, ironically, had the strongest coffee and the weakest customer service on the block. But the streets were empty. Not just quiet, dead silent. Alex, who thrived on grumpiness, suddenly felt unsettled. He wandered down the street, his sneakers echoing through a city that should have been buzzing with life. That's when he saw Ita barista, mid-pour, eyes wide, mouth open, completely still. He tapped her shoulder. No reaction. He screamed. Nothing. Her skin felt cold and firm, like polished marble. Statue 20 blocks away, in a completely different kind of apartment, this one filled with fairy lights. Potted succulents and handwritten affirmations taped to the mirror was Isabel. Isabel was everything Alex wasn't. 28, female, heart of gold, playlists full of 90s ballads, and a belief in love so strong it could make Disney jealous. She worked as a florist and part-time wedding planner, though she spent most of her time writing poems she never showed anyone. Her idea of a perfect day included tea, a Jane Austen novel, and daydreaming about her future spouse whom she was sure would appear at any moment holding a violin in the rain. When she woke up that morning, she thought it was just a blackout. Then the power didn't come back. Then her phone buzzed, then died. Her Catromio refused to eat his kibble, which was not a good omen. And when she opened her curtains, the city was still. No joggers, no honking horns, no flower truck deliveries, just statues everywhere. A man mid-phone call on the corner. A mother pushing a stroller, frozen in chimney. A traffic cop caught mid-wave. She ran outside, barefoot and terrified, calling out for any sign of life. The echoes mocked her. She screamed until her throat hurt. She cried until her tears ran dry. Then she laughed, because it was so absurd, so surreal, that laughing was all she had left. The earth, once a symphony of chaos, was now a museum of moments. And in the middle of this impossibly frozen world, two completely mismatched humans wandered separately, that is, until fate or maybe just sheer dumb coincidence decided it was time for them to meet. And where did this groundbreaking moment happen? A grocery store, a place where humanity once fought to the death over toilet paper. Alex was busy looting sorry, foraging for canned goods and any snacks that hadn't expired. He was talking to himself, sarcastically, like a doomsday vlog. He turned the corner, and that's when he saw her Isabel, holding a bag of marshmallows and a half. De frostage lasagna. They both froze. She stared at him like a miracle. He stared at her like a bug he didn't know what to do with. And in that moment, neither of them said anything profound. Instead, "You're not stone," he said. "You're not either," she replied. "Do you know what's going on?" "No clue." "Want to split this lasagna?" And that, dear viewers, was the beginning of the strangest, most reluctant love story the world never got to see. The day the world froze wasn't the end of the world. Not really. It was the start of something unexpected, awkward, ridiculous, and possibly romantic. But don't worry, we're just getting started. Because if you think surviving a global freeze is hard, try surviving each other. So, the world ended. Not with a zombie apocalypse. Not with fireballs from space or alien overlords demanding unpaid taxes. No. It ended with a puff of lab gas that turned 8 billion people into stone garden gnomes. But here's the kicker. Someone forgot to include Alex and Isabel on the extinction guest list. Lucky them, debatable, because now two utterly opposite human beings who, in normal circumstances, would never swipe right on each other, are the last man and woman standing on planet Earth. And spoiler alert, romance doesn't come easy when the dating pool has exactly one person. Let's rewind to the moment after they first locked eyes in that abandoned grocery store. Her clutching a bag of marshmallows like it was gold. Him pointing a half-eaten protein bar at her like a weapon. There was a pause, the kind that usually precedes something meaningful in movies. But this wasn't a movie. So instead, she asked, "Do you think everyone's just asleep And he replied, chewing loudly, "Nope. Pretty sure they're statues. I kicked 3 of them, just to make sure." Charming, right? But let's not be too quick to judge. Alex was never built for the apocalypse or social interaction in general. Before the world stopped turning, his most emotionally involved relationship was with a delivery app. He didn't like people. He tolerated them, preferably from a distance, through memes or noise-canceling headphones. His life was a comfortable cycle of solitude. Wake up, grumble, work remotely, eat frozen pizza, avoid feelings, scroll until sleep, rinse and repeat. Then came the gas. Then came the silence. And for a brief, glorious moment, he thought, finally, peace. That is, until she showed up. Isabel, on the other hand, was a human cupcake. Soft, warm, possibly filled with too much hope. She believed in soulmates, astrology, handwritten letters, and that love was the greatest force in the universe, second only to freshly baked cinnamon rolls. She kept gratitude journals. She talked to plants. She had named all 43 of the succulents in her apartment. When she found Alex in aisle 7, she genuinely thought he was a sign from the universe. The last person left just had to be her destiny, until he burped mid-sentence and asked if she had seen any peanut butter. So much for destiny. Let's be clear. Their dynamic wasn't exactly fireworks and violins. More like mismatched socks and passive-aggressive sarcasm. The first full day together was, to put it mildly, a disaster. They decided to coexist in a recently abandoned penthouse suite downtown, mostly because the building had a working generator, a rooftop view, and a hot tub that still sort of functioned if you kicked the filter every 5 minutes. Alex claimed the master bedroom. Isabel, gracious as ever, took the guest room, but decorated it with scented candles and inspirational quotes she stole from a frozen bookstore. The problem, everything. Alex liked silence. Isabel liked humming. Alex drank coffee black. Isabel made herbal infusions with names like Lunas or Clains. Alex wanted to ration food. Isabel wanted to bake cookies to make it feel like home. He read manuals. She painted murals on the wall using expired jelly. When she tried to bless the space with crystals, he pretended to be possessed by a demon named Kyle. It was a learning curve. But here's the thing about being the last 2 people on Earth. You can't exactly storm off in a huff. Where are you gonna go? The planet is closed. So they learned to compromise. Slowly. Painfully. For every eye. Roll-Alax gave Isabel offered a smile. For every monologue about loneliness Isabel shared, Alex grunted and handed her a bag of chips. Somewhere between raiding a department store for comfy pajamas and turning a fountain into a giant bubble bath, they started talking. Really talking. And not just about the world that was lost, but about themselves. He told her about his childhood. Strict parents, broken engagement, the fear of becoming someone who never mattered. She confessed that she'd always felt invisible, even when surrounded by people. That she never knew if her optimism was real. Or estar mo. And in that quiet, post-apocalyptic penthouse, they found something rare. Not love. Not yet, but curiosity. They began building a new kind of routine. Morning coffee made over a camping stove. Afternoon walks, navigating around stone joggers and frozen street performers. Evenings. Storytelling by candlelight. One night, they invented a whole soap opera about the statue family down the street. They gave them names, drama, a love triangle, weekly plot twists. They played games. They danced on rooftops. They argued over what genre of music humanity should preserve. There were awkward silences, emotional landmines, laughter that started fake and turned real. And one night, while stargazing in silence, Alex mumbled, "If I have to spend the rest of my life with one person, I guess it could be worse." Isabel smiled. "That's the most romantic thing you've said all week." Let's pause for a second and reflect on something. Love isn't always about sparks and butterflies. Sometimes it's about the quiet decision to stay, to listen, to care, even when it's inconvenient. Alex and Isabel weren't soulmates. They were two lonely people, thrown into an absurd, impossible situation, and instead of building walls, they began building something else. A friendship, a rhythm, a fragile, unspoken bond. In a world where time had stopped, they learned to move forward together. It wasn't perfect, but it was real. And in the middle of a silent planet, real was the rarest treasure of all. Of course, it wasn't all emotional growth and rooftop sunsets. There were still plenty of disasters, like the time Isabel tried to teach Alex yoga, and he pulled something so badly he screamed like a banshee and fell into a statue. Or the time Alex accidentally locked Isabel in the walk-in freezer during an argument about soap opera, or when they found an old karaoke machine and discovered that Isabel's rendition of Whitney Houston could probably wake the dead. But through every ridiculous fight, every dramatic overreaction, and every moment of silence that stretched too long, they stayed. Because when the world ends, your options become very, very simple. Be alone, or be brave enough to connect. And so, in a world of statues and silence, the last man and woman standing found something they never expected. Not just survival, not just companionship, but the first spark of something beautiful, awkward, hilarious, and entirely human. And maybe, just maybe, the beginning of something more. Because if they could survive the end of the world, surely they could survive each other. So, you're the last two people on Earth. What now? You've met. You've confirmed the other isn't a statue, a hallucination, or an AI simulation trying to trick you into a marketing survey. You've shared some awkward small talk, swapped apocalypse survival strategies, and tried your best not to get on each other's nerves. But now comes the hard part. Coexisting because they're surviving the end of the world. And then they're sharing a living space with someone whose very breathing pattern irritates you. Let's talk logistics. Alex and Isabel decided an intense debate over zombie defense strategies and peanut butter ration stew. Move into a mid-sized suburban house they found untouched on the edge of the city. Why that house? 3 reasons. 1, it had a working solar generator. 2, the previous owners had impeccable taste in mattresses. 3, there was a fully stocked wine cellar. Obviously, the third point held the most weight in the negotiation. The early days were like a bad sitcom pilot. Every mundane task became a mini war. Take toothpaste, for example. Alex was a capanda sink kind of guy. He squeezed from the middle. He didn't believe in rinsing after spitting. Isabel nearly wept the first time she saw the paste crusting over the cap like ancient lava. They had a 30-minute debate loud enough to echo through the statue-lined streets about whether or not it was psychopathic to brush one's teeth without background music. Then came laundry. Isabel insisted on sorting clothes by color, vibe, and emotional intention. Alex dumped everything into the washer with one pod and walked away. He called it efficient. She called it an affront to civilization. But domestic disaster wasn't limited to hygiene and laundry. Let's talk cooking. Isabel, Eva, the hopeless romantic, believed meals should be crafted with Karevan if it meant using expired ingredients, garnishing with suspicious herbs, and naming each dish something poetic like Apocalypse Amour Stew. Alex, on the other hand, believed in simplicity. If it didn't explode in the microwave, it was dinner. He once served a frozen burrito and called it deconstructed fusion cuisine. She didn't speak to him for an hour. Now, you'd think being alone in the world would make people more patient, more understanding. Wrong. They bickered like an old married couple 1 week into doomsday. About everything. Sleeping arrangements. Alex liked 1 pillow. Isabel needed 5. Temperature? He liked cold. She lit enough candles to mimic a music he played. She preferred birdsong and wind. They fought over remote controls that didn't even work anymore. They argued about board games with no official rule books. One night, they had a full-blown screaming match over the correct way to make s'mores. And yet, neither of them walked away, because in the middle of all that madness, something else was happening. They were learning how to exist together. It started with small things, like when Alex, usually the king of sarcasm, quietly fixed the broken hinges on Isabel's door without being asked. Or when Isabel left a cup of hot tea outside his room on a rainy morning because she remembered his throat had sounded raspy the night before. They never talked about those moments. They just happened. A rhythm began to form. Uneven, imperfect, but steady. Mornings were quiet. Isabel journaled, and Alex tinkered with electronics. Afternoons were noisy, filled with house chores, scavenging, painting, music, and more bickering. Evenings, those were their favorite. They'd cook, separately but together, and eat on the rooftop, sometimes in silence, sometimes with laughter, sometimes with confessions whispered under the stars. They invented holidays, just to feel something. Statue Day, where they honored their frozen neighbors by dressing them in ridiculous outfits. Pasta Thursday, dedicated to inventing new ways to cook spaghetti with canned vegetables and mystery cheese. Socks and Secrets Night, where they shared something personal while wearing the ugliest socks they could find in abandoned malls. They built a new world, tiny, weird, tender, a world made of routines, rituals, and reluctant affection. You see, living with someone isn't just about space, it's about allowing space. It's about accepting the quirks that don't make sense, the habits that grate, and the vulnerabilities that surface when the masks come off. Alex, the lone wolf, learned how to let someone in. He learned that listening wasn't just waiting for your turn to speak. He learned that showing up for dinner every night, if you're tired, cranky, and covered in motor oil, is sometimes the biggest gesture of love. And Isabel, she learned that love doesn't always look like fairy tales. It can look like compromise, like fixing a clogged sink without yelling, like apologizing after an argument you technically won, like laughing when things go wrong, or sitting in silence when someone needs it. She learned that sometimes the most romantic words aren't "I love you." They're "I saved the last cookie for you." Of course, things weren't perfect. There was the time Alex tried to surprise Isabel with a bubble bath and accidentally used floor cleaner. Or when Isabel painted a giant mural of hope on the living room wall, and Alex thought it looked like a haunted emoji. Or the unforgettable moment when they broke into a zoo and tried to ride a stone elephant. But through every ridiculous mishap, they grew closer. Not because they had to, but because they chose to every single day. In a world without rules, without structure, without expectations, love found a way to bloom, not loudly, not perfectly, but patiently, quietly, like a flower pushing through concrete. Alex and Isabel didn't become soulmates overnight. They didn't become some fairy tale couple dancing in moonlight. They became something better, real, messy, flawed, beautifully human. Two people learning that intimacy is more than passion. It's partnership. It's showing up, unstaying, even when the toothpaste is still in the wrong place. So, here they are, the last man and woman on earth. Still arguing, still laughing, still waking up every morning to face another day together. They've survived the silence. They've survived each other. And they've started something that even the apocalypse couldn't erase. Not just survival, not just routine, but love in its strangest, most genuine form. Cities aren't supposed to be this quiet. They were built to buzz, to hum, to roar with human chaos. Car horns, shouting vendors, couples arguing outside, coffee shops, buskers tuning guitars, babies crying, lovers laughing, the sounds of life. But now, the city stands still. A sculpture garden of daily moments turned permanent. It's not just eerie, it's intimate, like walking through someone's memories. Mid-thought, mid-step, mid-sentence. And knowing they'll never finish what they started. This is the world Alex and Isabel wake up to every day. A silent, frozen planet. But instead of mourning it, they turned it into their playground. And occasionally, their confessional booth. It began with Mr. Henderson, the mailman. He was still on the porch, hand outstretched, holding a letter addressed to someone who would never read it. Isabel started talking to him on day 37. At first, it was a joke, just a one-liner. "Hey, Mr. Henderson, you look like you've had a long day." Alex laughed, then mocked her, then inevitably joined her. They gave Mr. Henderson a voice, a backstory, a deeply complicated love affair with the pastry chef down the block. It was stupid, and it was the first time they felt connected to the frozen world around them. Not as something lost, but something still oddly present. Soon, the whole neighborhood came to life. There was Bench Kappa, a man and woman mid-argument at the park, forever captured in dramatic hand gestures. Isabel imagined them as star-crossed lovers. Alex insisted they were siblings fighting over pizza. Yugarama at the community center was always mid-stretch. Isabel bowed to her daily in mock reverence. Alex, for reasons unknown, gave her a gangster rap backstory. Pigeon Man on 12th and Main was covered in frozen birds. They honored him with bread offerings and considered him their city's patron saint. They hosted fake interviews, invented dramatic monologues, even filmed mockumentaries starring the statues as their supporting cast. It wasn't just play, it was survival, emotional survival. Because when the world stops moving, sometimes the only thing left to do is pretend it hasn't. But it wasn't always a comedy. Some days, it was unbearable. Some statues made Isabel cry, like the little girl reaching for a balloon that would never float. The bride outside City Hall with her mouth wide in laughter. The man kneeling with a ring mid-proposal, eyes full of hope. Moments that were frozen in time. Moments that made her wonder if they had been happy, if they had finished what they started, if anyone in those last few seconds knew the world was ending. She once spent a whole afternoon with a mother holding a baby, sat across from her on a sidewalk, just staring. Alex didn't say anything. He just left a flower on the stroller and sat next to Isabel. They didn't speak for hours. They didn't need to. But grief has a strange way of sitting beside laughter in the apocalypse, because the very next day, they threw a birthday bash for Statue Greg, a barista who once worked the corner cafe and now had a permanent expression of bitter confusion. They made a cake out of protein bars, hung streamers, even gave speeches. To Greg, Alex toasted, who never spelled my name right and always judged my choice of soy milk. You were a menace and a hero. Isabel put sunglasses on him and claimed Greg had lived a double life as an international spy. That night, they slow danced to music only they could hear, under the fluorescent sign of the coffee shop. Greg watched silently. They pretended he approved. The silence of the city was both their enemy and their stage. They filled it with laughter. They filled it with arguments. They filled it with stories. Like when Isabel decided to resurrect Fashion Week, dressing statues in everything from sequined dresses to dinosaur costumes found in an abandoned party store. Or when Alex took a traffic cop statue and made him the mayor of Freesville, delivering nightly addresses in an overly dramatic voice. They used their imagination like a flashlight in the dark. It didn't chase away the silence completely, but it gave them something to walk toward. You might think talking to statues is madness, and maybe it is, but in a world like theirs, madness is a form of love, a way of holding on to what used to be while making space for what might come next. Isabel would whisper secrets to the frozen crowds in Times Square. Alex would vent his frustrations to a frozen crossing guard outside their block. It became their therapy, their audience, their community, their friends who couldn't judge, interrupt, or leave. One day, Isabel painted a mural behind a line of statues at the art museum. A bright, chaotic burst of color that exploded across the concrete like a sunrise. She called it Conversations with Silence. It was messy, too bright, too emotional. Alex said it looked like a unicorn got sick. But later that night, he left a post-it note beside it that read, "This is the first time I've liked looking at this wall." She pretended not to see it. He pretended not to care, but both of them slept better that night. There's something haunting about a silent city, but there's something beautiful too. It forces you to listen, to observe, to see people, even frozen, as more than background noise, as stories, as echoes of life. And in that silence, Alex and Isabel found not just space to grieve, but space to grow, to play, to love. Not the loud, dramatic love from movies, but the quiet kind. The kind that builds when you're naming statues after your exes. The kind that laughs during citywide hikes. The kind that sits beside you in silence and doesn't try to fix anything. Just stays. And maybe that's the secret. Maybe love isn't always found in grand gestures or perfect moments. Maybe it's found in talking to a frozen mailman on your porch, or waving to a pigeon-covered stranger every morning, or making someone laugh in a city that forgot how to. Alex and Isabel didn't rebuild society. They didn't find a cure. They didn't wake the world up, but they brought it back to life in their own way. One statue at a time, one conversation at a time. One quiet, beautiful, ridiculous day at a time. Love doesn't always arrive like fireworks. Sometimes it enters quietly, awkwardly, accidentally, especially when you're the last two people on Earth, and you still can't agree on where the laundry basket should go. By this point, Alex and Isabel had been coexisting in the end of the world for several months. They had a routine, a home, inside jokes, statue friends, co-authored conspiracy theories about what really happened in the frozen yoga studio. They had built something resembling peace, but love. Love is a whole different apocalypse. And as it turns out, you can only pretend not to fall for someone for so long. Especially when that someone drives you absolutely insane. It started as all great romantic disasters do, with an argument, abiguan, the kind that begins with sarcasm and ends with shouting. The day had begun normally. If anything can be normal when your neighbors are frozen in time and you get your weather forecast by looking at the sky, Alex was in a mood. One of those quiet, grumpy spirals where everything from the squeak in the cabinet door to the fact that they were out of canned ravioli seemed like a personal attack. Isabel, ever the optimist, tried to lift the mood with music, conversation, and her homemade sunshine muffins that tasted suspiciously like baking soda and regret, but nothing worked. Finally, she snapped. You know, just because the world ended doesn't mean you get to act like you're the only one suffering. Alex stared at her, blinking, then laughed. The wrong move? What? You miss your gluten. Free book club. Sorry if I'm not sunshine and yoga about the collapse of humanity. And that was it. The gloves were off. They screamed. They paced. They brought up every unresolved irritation. The toothpaste war, the incident with the burned rice, the time Isabel painted a mural over Alex's meticulously organized survival spreadsheet wall. Emotions spilled, voices cracked. It wasn't just about toothpaste or rice. It was about fear, loneliness, the weight of being the last two people on a planet full of echoes. Alex said things he didn't mean. Isabel said things she meant. Finally, she stormed out, slamming the door so hard that one of the picture frames fell and shattered. He didn't follow, not immediately. Instead, he stood in the hallway, staring at the broken glass, hearing nothing but his own breathing, and the quiet that had become so normal it now felt cruel. Isabel walked for hours, through empty streets, past frozen playgrounds, abandoned, and the library where she used to imagine meeting the love of her life, between the poetry aisle and the espresso machine. Now there was only silence. She found herself at the river, the same spot where they once had a picnic and debated which extinct snack food deserved to be resurrected first. She sat. She cried. She whispered to the statues nearby, "I don't know what I'm doing. I don't know how to do this." How do you fall in love with someone in the middle of the end? No one answered. But sometimes saying the words is enough. Meanwhile, back at home, Alex was pacing, replaying every word, every tone, every time he had chosen sarcasm over vulnerability, safety over sincerity. And underneath the gruffness, the layers of cynicism and control, was one horrifying realization. He didn't want her to leave, not because he couldn't survive without her. He could, but because survival meant nothing if she wasn't there when he woke up the next day. For the first time in his life, Alex felt what it meant to need someone, and that scared him more than any apocalypse ever could. He found her just after sunset, still by the river. She didn't look up right away, just sat there, legs crossed, watching the wind ripple across the water. When he finally spoke, his voice was softer than she'd ever heard. "You were right. I've been a disaster. I'm sorry." She looked at him, eyes swollen, lips tight, heart on her sleeve. "You don't have to be perfect, Alex. You just have to try." And for once, he did. They didn't kiss. Right then, there were no fireworks, no swelling orchestral scores or rain falling dramatically. Just two people sitting side by side. He held out his hand. She took it, and the silence, the one that usually pressed on their chests like gravity, felt lighter. They walked home slowly, no words, just footsteps and breath. And when they got back, they cleaned up the broken picture frame together. Love wasn't a moment. It wasn't the hand-holding, or the apology, or the shared cup of tea later that night. It was everything. It was how they learned to fight and still choose to stay. How they gave each other space, but never let the distance last too long. It was how Isabel noticed when Alex's shoulders tensed and offered comfort before he asked. And how Alex, grumpy, emotionally allergic Alex, began leaving notes around the house. "Roof's clear for stargazing tonight. I found chocolate. Don't ask where. You're my favorite argument." Small things, quiet things, accidental romance, not by grand gestures, but by gentle repetition, by choosing each other again and again. Of course, this is still Alex and Isabel we're talking about. There were still disasters, like the time Isabel tried to surprise Alex with breakfast in bed and accidentally set off the emergency sprinkler system. Or when Alex built a romantic fire pit that ended with melted patio chairs and a singed eyebrow. Or the unforgettable Valentine's Day reenactment, starring statue versions of Romeo and Juliet, complete with makeshift costumes, original sonnets, and an improvised sword fight that broke a broomstick in half. But underneath all the ridiculous was something very real. Love in its weirdest, most wonderful form. Love in the apocalypse isn't like love in the movies. There are no candlelit restaurants, no public declarations in train stations, no surprise reunions at airports, just two people in a broken world. Choosing to laugh, choosing to stay, choosing to try again and again Despite the mess, the fear, the silence, they didn't have forever. No one does, but they had this. This strange, beautiful, stubborn, accidental thing that grew between them. And sometimes that's more than enough. And so, as the stars returned to their nightly performance, and the statues of the city continued their silent vigil, Alex and Isabel sat on their rooftop, wrapped in a shared blanket, sipping lukewarm cocoa and trying to guess what the world would look like. If it ever woke up, they didn't have answers, but they had each other. And in a world where everything else had stopped, that was more than enough to keep moving forward. It had been 1 year, 365 days since the world stood still, 12 months since traffic lights blinked pointlessly, stopped brewing coffee, airports froze mid, and sidewalks filled with people who would never move again. And in that year, Alex and Isabel had gone from complete strangers to reluctant housemates to unlikely companions to something even more fragile and more powerful. They had become love in its purest, strangest form, the kind that grows in silence, that takes root in ruins, that dances even when there's no music left to play. And on the 1-year anniversary of the world freezing, they decided to celebrate. Not mourn, not hide, but celebrate by doing something no one had done in a year. Something wild, something absurd, something beautiful. They decided to dance. Now, this wasn't some ordinary dance. There was no DJ, no playlists, no disco lights, no one watching except pigeons, frozen strangers, and the occasional raccoon. But Isabel had a vision. She wanted to create a ballroom right in the center of the abandoned city. So they did. Together, over the course of 3 days, they transformed the old train station downtown into a palace of memory. They cleared debris, swept marble floors, draped curtains found in luxury stores over shattered windows. They strung solar-powered fairy lights across the platforms. Candles in cracked jars lined the staircases. Isabel painted a giant mural of silhouetted dancers on one wall. Alex, who claimed to have 2 left feet and 1 right to complain about them, reluctantly designed a dance floor because he'd found old speakers and figured, why not? They dressed in the finest clothes they could find. She wore a silver gown from an abandoned bridal boutique. He found a tuxedo 3 sizes too big and cinched the waist with duct tape. Together, they looked like the last characters in a fairy tale no one finished writing. But it was enough. More than enough. The night arrived. The station glowed like a forgotten temple. The city breathed in silence. And for a few precious hours, time began to move again. They danced. No choreography, no steps, just movement and laughter and closeness. They stumbled, they spun, they whispered things only they could hear. There was no crowd, no applause. Just the sound of their own breath, the distant hum of electricity, and a dusty speaker playing music from a playlist Isabel had titled, "If the World Ends, Let's Dance Anyway." Song after song, they drifted across the station. Slow waltzes, clumsy tangus, silly, hopping, swing dances that made them laugh until they collapsed onto the cold marble floor. They weren't graceful, but they were alive. And that was enough. Somewhere near midnight, Isabel rested her head on Alex's shoulder, eyes closed, smiling. He held her like she was made of stardust and memory. And in the low golden light of their makeshift ballroom, he whispered, "If this is the last dance we ever have, I'm okay with that." She looked up, eyes filled with so much peace it hurt. Who says it has to be the last? And just like that, they kept moving, even as the music ran out, even as the speaker crackled, even as the candles burned low. Two people in love, in the quiet heart of a world that had forgotten how to move. Still dancing, still choosing each other, still saying, "We are here." Here's the thing, no one tells you about endings. They rarely neat, rarely loud. Sometimes the world ends not with sirens, but with silence, not with chaos, but with stillness and love. Love doesn't wait for the perfect moment. It creates its own, even at the end, even when no one's watching, even when the dance floor is cracked and the chandeliers are broken and the music is a little out of tune. Because love, real love, isn't about the setting. It's about the decision to keep moving, to keep dancing, even when the world doesn't. Alex and Isabel didn't save the world. They didn't unfreeze the statues. They didn't restart civilization or discover a cure or rebuild society. But they found something rarer. They found someone to dance with at the end of all things. And that's more than survival. That's victory. In the quiet aftermath of a world gone still, two hearts kept beating. Two souls kept colliding. 2 feet kept moving. Clumsy, determined, full of grace. And the earth, for once, felt not empty, but full of love, of laughter, of one last dance, and maybe many more to come. If you're ever afraid the world will end, just remember, even in silence, someone might still reach for your hand. Even in darkness, there might still be a dance. And even when everything stops, love finds a way to keep going. Because sometimes the last couple on earth becomes the beginning of something new. The end.